Om Namo Gurudev Namo. 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 Hi,
Hi, Rika. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. I'm a bit worried that it's not actually showing on any platforms, but I'm hoping that this is going live and people can see this.
Oh, can we? Oh, we can't tell if it's showing it.
Uh,
Well, hopefully it's at least recording. Yeah.
yeah, 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 yeah.
Okay.
Um,
Okay. So this is our first ever live talk. This is my first ever live talk that I've ever done in my life. So it's kind of exciting. And
yeah.
thank you for having the idea to start this podcast together.
Well, I got very much inspired by the conversations that we've been having on other platforms. So I thought, but because it was always with other people and with not specifically this focus, I always felt like there was more that there we could talk about. So it was just this itch that I just wanted to kind of scratch and see if we can elaborate a little bit more because we
Mhm.
both share this background of activism and social advocacy, you could say, and that actually being our pathway into practicing Kundalini somehow. Um, and I'm curious to hear what your pathway was, and I'm really happy that we can get to know each other a bit better through these talks.
Mhm. Yes. For anyone who doesn't know, Rika and I know each other through Kundalini teacher training, Kundalini yoga teacher training with Yoga Vision. And it's been a really, Rika actually graduated from the course a couple of years ago and is a mentor. And I'm currently moving towards graduation. And it's been a very, very positive experience overall. I'm very thankful for it. And just to talk a bit about my pathway from activism into yoga. Um, Basically, I'm going to give a very brief version because there's so much to say. But I grew up um, in let's say, a compromised environment. I grew up deep in the woods in a beautiful, gorgeous place, but an environment rife with trauma and abuse and all sorts of lovely themes like that. And lucky for me, I always managed to manifest, have really great, wonderful people around me outside of my family, and was able to um, move forward with difficulty, though, at a young age. And in my early 20s, I finally, after about 12 years of working in the service industry at cafes and restaurants and feeling like I would never be able to do any other kind of work, was hired at a Center for Gender Advocacy in Montreal, where I proceeded to spend the next 6 years working with um, families of missing and murdered Indigenous women, survivors of sexual assault, working on different reproductive justice campaigns, anti-racist campaigns. And I had done a lot of this work before I had this job. I was doing sort of unpaid volunteer type work as well. It was just like always an attraction for me. I think because growing up, I had a father who was an absolute tyrant and a bully, and I always kind of saw him as I stood up to him all the time. I was in fight mode as a child. When we talk about fight or flight or fawn or freeze, I was fight. So I was constantly fighting injustice in my father. And when I moved towards activism in my 20s, more intentionally, I it was kind of like for me a continuation of that advocacy, like the self advocacy extended into advocacy for others. And there was a division, but there wasn't quite a division either. It all blurred, which was both good and bad, which led to burnout eventually, um, which then eventually led me to Kundalini yoga. So just a very quick thing about that too is that I spent a couple of years hitchhiking across Canada. I'm in Montreal, actually, I should have said. Hitchhiking across Canada in my 20s and hanging out with hippies. And of course, I use the word lightly, but hippies in BC at rainbow gatherings in the woods and all of this. And I remember loving it because people were so into meditation and so into sometimes chanting different ritual aspects of making their self-love or community love more intentional. But there seemed to be some real lacking when it came to substance of belief, substance of standing up for injustice in the world, substance like that, things that I really thought mattered. And meanwhile, in the activist world that I knew, there was a lot of standing up and advocating, but there was a real lack of self-love and self-care and just taking care of the self. It was almost stigmatized. So
Yeah.
so then I thought, okay, the two together are what's needed. It's just not, it's easier said than done. And then years later, I find myself about to be a certified Kundalini yoga teacher, and I've been teaching since May, and it's been going beautifully. And how about your path to Kundalini
I
yoga?
would say it's very similar. It's very similar. I would say that the uh, the things happening in my childhood, which actually I didn't recognize until much later, that there was this dysfunction. A lot of anger towards patriarchy and like misogyny or inequality. And since I was very, very small, I just had this reflex of, even in kindergarten, I saw somebody being bullied and I would just go in between, uh, very sort of spontaneously, and not really knowing that actually I would end up being bullied, because that's why nobody went in between, because they didn't want to become the victims. And then this sort of imprinted need to fight for justice, it just kind of stayed and stayed. And I myself went to arts, so I've been a creative, and I never actually suffered from the oppression of working from 9 to 5. But then there are other problematics in the artistic art life, and when artist went through academia, and the same thing, it's not the normal 9 to 5 job, but there are some, like the same thing with arts and academia. And then what happened with activism is that there are some mechanisms that kind of allows us to be just a part of us, visible in those, and the conversations are very much within a canon or within the paradigm. And when you try to change them, it kind of, it can't be processed. There's a kind of a cognitive dissonance there that was always problematic. And it's kind of a sequence of several burnouts, the last being burning out from activism really badly, because the stigmatization of self-care. People would say, like, why would we take care, or why would we have counseling or group meetings, or taking holidays, when people don't have passports, or people are being deported, or people's basic human rights are not being fulfilled, and are they compromised. And in the end, I felt like we were hating each other. I hated myself, I hated my life, I hated other activists, and I started to be very grumpy with people that I was helping. And there were constant fires that just kept on coming up. Like, the fires never stopped, the emergencies never stopped. And I realized that the system is just chewing us humans. And until we can change something on a deeper level that changes the paradigm of the system, nothing's going to change. And then taking the steps, like, okay, how do I change that? Oh, then I have to change that. And then it was kind of breadcrumbs coming back to myself. And then various things, chronic pain, fatigue, weight gain, a lot of things. It just came to me. I actually didn't like Kundalini yoga for like 25 years. But then it just came to me. I had had some beautiful experiences in Austin, and to say that I'm in Finland, in Helsinki, I had some beautiful moments, and I realized there are other ways to do Kundalini yoga than what maybe the first waves had been. It just called to me, and I realized that it has to be an inner activism. I have to learn to change how we take care of ourselves, how we interact with other people, and that's just the seed of changing the world.
Yeah, yeah. There's so many parallels between us as well, actually, because I also didn't mention, but have been in the art world and the writing world and dealing with that as well, and liking parts of it and very much disliking other parts of it. And also I didn't even mention issues with my body, trauma stain in my body, pain and digestive issues of all kinds also very much led me down this road as well. And I also wasn't so sure about Kundalini yoga at first because especially because I think a lot of people can relate to this. They know that there's chanting involved and they're like, and I get that. And but for me it's become an integral part, and I mean maybe we can talk more about that, but just an integral part of putting the spirit back in yoga, the spirit that's so often stripped from yoga here in the West. From we always see the yoga asanas on Instagram or online, just the difficult poses, the flexible poses, the thin muscular people. But there's actually other branches of yoga than the movement and poses. And I feel like Kundalini yoga really brings us back to ourselves. In part with voice, in part with meditation, in part with relaxation. And so that's why I feel like it can be such a powerful form of justice. I think justice was one of the themes that brought us together for this talk, because I was throwing around the word self-justice. And to me, this really speaks to I was really proud of thinking of it, but I was quick Google search, and it's definitely not new. Other people have thought of it, but basically this idea that, and I think you used the word interactivism before too. And to me, these are kind of very much connected where, like justice, the justice within is essentially being able to elevate our own awareness of what's going on with ourselves and help to unstick and circulate energy in our own bodies and brains in order to send it to where it's most needed for our own healing, for our own fulfillment of potential as human beings. And so that to me is this concept of self-justice, and it very much ripples outwards into whatever environment we happen to be in. So self-justice to me is the bridge leading to social justice. And of course, there's no I think it's very much possible for people to do great work in the social justice world without working on themselves. But it's a meaningful, very, very deep and meaningful and profound experience, and also very good for oneself to go that route, to go looking from within and potentially take a healthier route through to serving others than just burning out and not being able to serve anyone, let alone yourself.
Yeah, 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 and I think that self-justice brings beautifully also this aspect of the right for being a holistic human being, that we have different aspects. It's not just our physical body, and it's not just our mental body, but the right to also experience our life on a spiritual realm. Because I think for me, the mantras wasn't really the trigger. I know it's for a lot of people, but the spirituality is. It's because I live in a country where whenever you bring up spiritual, mental thing is okay, but if you start to talk about the soul or spirit, it's immediately connected to religion, and it's just a really red flag. And so that was a bit like, I don't want to go into any cult or anything like that. So, but that was all kind of the part for myself, is this accepting that I'm actually reconnecting with my own cultural roots of spirituality, which goes back into the Nordic shamanism and all this ancient technology that connects us to a wider grid, wider community. Connection is a really big word, and it's actually Kundalini yoga has been my pathway back to earth, back to even sort of understanding myself as part of an ecosystem. And that comes from this very deep medicine, which I didn't, that when I came in, I didn't really at all consider that this would be very powerful medicine that can powerfully de-traumatize, powerfully realign, open up new potentials and possibilities outside the sort of consumerist version of that thinking. Like when we talk about opening, like unlocking your full potential, it can be very much sort of this like, how do I say, consumerist,
Of course.
capitalist endeavor.
Yeah.
Yeah. But
Yeah.
actually, there's something very beautiful in a way that you can actually be yourself, that you can actually find your truth, your satnam, and that you can stay within that. You get that inner power and that inner stability of not being guided by triggers, by fears. And I think that is very important when we work in activism, because there is a lot of emotions and there's a lot of crises happening. So those can definitely always be these waves that can take you, but this ability to ground and see clearly and just have a very deep faith in guidance, and that we can heal, we can rebound from problems and difficult times, then that's also really important.
Mhm. Yeah, no, I completely agree. Um, just coming back to connecting to our own roots and spirituality, I would also just want to mention a little tidbit about myself as well. That for me, this has been a very humorous journey as well, because I started out with my father, who I mentioned earlier, who um, whose grandfather was from India, from the Punjab, where Kundalini originates. And I am not really connected to that culture. Uh, my father grew up in South America as a result of colonial pathways and all of that. Um,
Yeah.
but this has been, and also to add to that, my very kind of questionable father also happened to be a self-proclaimed guru, and so he made, this was back in the 80s and 90s in rural Quebec, and he made meditation tapes, and he had followers. And when I say followers, I'm not talking about online, because the internet wasn't even a thing. There were
Yeah,
people
yeah,
coming around, and he wasn't wearing white or anything like that, but maybe occasionally, no turban or anything. But he had the look, he had the long hair, he had the beard, he sewed his own clothes, and he was very much exotified in the white rural place that we lived in, and people really looked up to him. And I saw through him because we were at war for my entire childhood. And so I've always had, I think that's another reason that Kundalini Yoga really wasn't speaking to me at first, is that I've
yeah,
always have been allergic to yogis. It's like, and not yogis, sorry, gurus. And the
yeah,
word
yeah,
guru, and it gets so abused, that word guru, just even in the tech world, like such and such an SEO guru, this, that. And I'm like, okay, vomit maybe a little bit.
yeah,
But basically, one of the things that I have um, decided I love about Kundalini Yoga, and I think it's in part because we found the right teacher to bring
yeah,
us in, but is this emphasis on our deep intuition, on the guru within, on listening to our own our own deepest voice, outside of sorry, over any external voice. And I think when Kundalini Yoga, there've been things about Kundalini Yoga that some people find sketchy, yogis in the past who've kind of brought it into a bad light. It's all this cultish behavior that can happen in any spiritual environment, essentially, including my own house with my father, who spouted all kinds of beautiful ideas but didn't live them at all. So, same thing can happen in any environment. And this is why I love the way we've been taught Kundalini Yoga is very much justice oriented, very much focused on the self voice and intuition, and learning to expand it outwards from there. So Um,
Mm.
just wanted to put that out there. And I also wanted to say something about Ahimsa, our actual topic.
Yeah.
um,
Just to there was something that I was thinking when you were saying the gurus. I have a little bit similar experience with my grandfather. My maternal grandfather was a pastor, and it was a little bit the same thing, that he was very sort of, he loved to have to preach and have these gowns and be in front of people, and do the kind of the theater of the holy man, when then the truth was completely different at home. So definitely yes, I very much relate to this of seeing through the phony, the
yeah.
phony holy.
Such a
um
common phenomenon.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, power corrupts. Power
yeah.
corrupts. And there's, I think, in this whole topic about gurus and disciples, followers, it's probably a good topic for one of our future
Yes,
conversations,
it's
because
true.
there's something about when we talk about self-justice and even inner activism, it's also about sovereignty, about how do you navigate this world of being led by somebody, and how do you actually take your own responsibility of things that happen, and how that whole conversation, it's very nuanced, let's say. It's a very nuanced
Mm.
topic. So
No,
but
I agree.
yes,
I
let's
agree.
move to,
Yes,
let's move to
Ahimsa.
Ahimsa. Why
Um,
did you want to talk about Ahimsa?
well, it's just when you brought up this idea of talking about of doing live talks that talk about Kundalini yoga and activism and maybe integrating creativity in there, which to me is just inherently there, of course. But um, one of my first thoughts, because I've been seeing stuff about this go by in me as well, and I've thought about it here and there, was this idea of ahimsa, or non-harm or non-violence, which is kind of a major principle in certain religions like Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism, but also it's one of the first, or the first yama in yogic principle, an ethical restraint of ahimsa. So, and I feel like this is true for a lot of people, and maybe it used to be true for me before I started to more intentionally think about it in recent times. Just this idea of nonviolence, or non-harm, or ahimsa, however you want to think it, is, I think, to many seems like something that can be rather passive, or something that's largely about lifestyle choices. Maybe we're vegan, maybe we're vegetarian, maybe we exercise non-harm by the choices we make in our food. Maybe we exercise non-harm by other consumer choices we make. Maybe maybe we just don't actively hurt anyone. That's our intention anyway. Maybe but then there's this, and there's also, to go along with this. Well, I'm getting ahead of myself now. But then there's not often this idea of active non-harm, where actually we're not just trying to reduce harm in our own sphere. We're not just trying to like avoid doing harm, but maybe we're also actively acting to reduce harm in the world around us, to reduce harm in our own small worlds, our own small surroundings, maybe even going beyond that if we are personally ready for that, and advocating, sharing our voice at a higher level, more people hearing what we're saying, standing up for injustice wherever it should show its lovely face, since it's everywhere these days. And so um, Ahimsa at its core is a principle that very much makes room for um, this active interpretation, this active enacting, this active ingesting and internalizing of this principle. So,
Mm.
I think a lot of people, especially in the yoga world too, our teacher Salima has spoken about this, where yoga is often seen as like an apolitical space where we shouldn't be talking about politics or activism, and which is ridiculous and a little bit offensive, or even a lot offensive to me ultimately when I get right down to it, because As we've learned in our own course, and as some others may be aware of, I mean, the very history of yoga is a very, very political one. There's a history of British colonization of India. I can't get into that too deeply, but there's this whole history of yoga itself being repressed by colonial forces, and so even for Indians to reclaim that was a political act in and of itself. And so if you really think about it, if you try to move your attention away from all the shiny commercialized versions of yoga that we see here in the West on a constant basis, even as awareness does rise and things are changing, it's still very prevalent. Even as we move our attention away from that, I've lost the train of my sentence now, of course. but
Can I come in?
basically, yes, please. Yes, please.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I mean, if you think about somebody there's a word that I kind of like. It's like the spiritual misogynist. It's like you're so righteous in the way that you live, that then you become actually quite violent towards, or yeah, you become quite violent towards people who are not like you. And a lot of times I feel that mm, uh, the ability to say that something like yoga is not political is a privilege that only some people can have, mostly white people and people with money. For people who are not in such privileged position, it is political. It is just the ability to afford to go to a class, the ability to be able to go to take the bus to a class, for women to be able to go safely to an early morning sadhana. All those things become questions of society, and in that way also political. And I call it spandex yoga, because it's just about like
Yeah,
this yeah, it's very body oriented, and very, very empty. And it's also a little bit of like, just because you take away the political aspect, you also take away the spiritual aspect.
exactly.
And that is somehow, I think it's just as a form of cultural appropriation. It at least begs for awareness of it. Even if you have your total right to do whatever you want in the way you want to do it, that's your human right to do. But still, the sort of awareness and humbleness, or at least gratitude towards where it comes from, I think it's sort of a core issue as
Mhm.
part of ahimsa.
I agree. Sorry.
Yeah, no, and just to say that from the point of view of other yogic scriptures, like I really, for me as an activist, I found very, very interesting to read the Bhagavad Gita, because it is a situation where a family is torn apart and they are fighting against each other, and and of course it's a metaphor for our spiritual growth and with our ego and all that stuff. But there is also something very interesting in this conversation between Arjuna and Krishna, where Arjuna is saying like, I am a soldier and I am a leader, but I cannot go and kill my, the people who taught me things, the people who are my cousins and my dear ones, my uncles. And then this whole sentence really stuck in my head, that it's not bad karma to do bad things, but it is also bad karma to not intervene when you have the opportunity to stop somebody doing harm for millions or other people. So in that sense, it's as a child that was bullied, there's this whole thing that people there is a very, very strong global pandemic of people thinking that they just step out and they're fine. Like, I didn't do anything. I would,
Mhm.
like it, as if that would
Yeah.
be part of ahimsa or nonviolence, or not perpetrating more, aggravating the situation, but actually it is creating very sinister world right now when we don't stand up for injustice and we don't fight with all our privileges and abilities when we can.
I agree 100%. And I just like it's hard not to think rather constantly about how much, I mean, in the internet era, the AI era, like there's just constant, as we all know, influx of information, nonstop bombardment of information. We're watching a genocide unfold live on Instagram. It's just unprecedented levels of information flooding us. Nothing is happening in private, and but information everywhere, wisdom nowhere. It often feels like it just feels like there's no. I don't know. Maybe it desensitizes in part. Maybe I don't actually think that this technology, which is so useful to us, is being used to its full potential ultimately.
No,
Um,
no, no.
but it's just the information does not equal higher awareness. That's the thing. People just, and it's understandable in so many cases, people are going about their lives and feeling stuck and not even knowing how to intervene a lot of the time. And kids and work and this and that, and it's a trap. It's all very much a trap, and it's very difficult to extricate oneself. And there are definitely people who do have more clear paths of more clear abilities to intervene, and who don't as well, of course, and a much clearer privilege. But for everyone else, for everyone who just feels stuck and like the world's going to shit and they'd like to intervene, but how on earth are they ever going to? It's just a flood of images constantly, and it just feels helpless, and they're just trying to pay the bills. I feel like Kundalini yoga has something to offer there. I really
Yeah,
do, because
yeah.
I feel this way too all the time, and I haven't been actively organizing for some time now. I my activism has taken different forms, sometimes in the form of writing, sometimes um, in the forms of just intervening. I definitely am an intervener in general when something is in my face. But there are so many different ways to do that. And so when it comes to Kundalini yoga, I just kind of feel like sometimes when we're completely overwhelmed by everything going on in this world, this human world that we're all part of, it doesn't seem like going within and breathing and hacking into one's system, so to speak, and helping our nervous system and helping our glands to function properly is going to do anything for anyone else. But it's really doing something for yourself that really just kind of patterns, rewires, refreshes your own consciousness can do so much for the energy you have to kind of interact with the world going forward. It's just, and it's not obvious until you really sit down and try it a few times
Yeah.
necessarily. Sometimes it is. Sometimes one breathing exercise, and you're like, okay, why have I not been taking advantage of this very, very powerful, very free form of self actualization? Because for me, this has really helped me to have more energy and in the world. Yes, it's still an exhausting world, but in general, it's really helped me to have more energy, even if I'm not quite back at the stage of participating in highway blockades right now, which is something I used to do every now and then.
Me too. Me too. I'm still
Yeah,
recuperating and rebooting and reinventing the whole system.
exactly. But the energy we put out there, just in the day to day, the things that we hold people to account for, the way we do that, and how effective holding that is, those conversations are, that all depends on our own energy. And if we're fighting all kinds of illness and physical limitations and mental imbalances, emotional imbalances, which so many of us are, and it's understandable, really. But if all our energy is being taken up with all of that, which mine has been many times in the past, then
Yeah.
we're really limited in what we can do for ourselves or for anyone else. And that's the other thing also that our teacher said recently, Salima. someone said something about I about doing Kundalini yoga so that they could help themselves and then ultimately for the purpose of helping others. And she also pointed out that something I liked was that, well, why don't you start with just doing it for why can't it just be also for yourself for starters? Like really just focus on your own energy, your own awareness for starters, and then whatever comes out of that in the outside world after, I think will be more powerful. Um, if
Yeah.
you can truly, truly love yourself in those practices first and focus on yourself. But anyway, putting all that
So
out there. Yeah.
no, no, totally. It's the putting your mask on, but 2.0 in a way. And I would actually like, yes, and continue on that, um, there is a lot that happens. Not, I think that as activists, we need new trust and new wisdom and new techniques of changing it, and it can be, and it requires that we are self-actualized and healed leaders
Mm.
in a way that that how we, I really believe that it's like how we interact with human to human, person to person, are those small ways that we change the world. Like if we can, and that's why I really want to focus on coaching, not just Kundalini coaching, but any kind of coaching with people in leadership position, because they affect so many other people who work for them. Also, they decide how money is being used, what kind of projects are being actualized, and
Mhm.
those kind of, we tend to underestimate the value of that person to person interaction, but also the whole energetic, like how do we change the alchemy of our air, of the energy that we are living in, through things like meditations, and this could be considered really like total new age woo woo, but it is a very powerful thing when you recognize it, that, oh, I reacted in a very different way in a situation which maybe affected a lot of people, and knowing that that maybe gives the other people a glimpse of an alternative way of behaving and acting, which is very radical in that little grassroots kind of change. And just to finish my my monologue, is to say that there's something very interesting in this idea of raising vibration, raising our frequency, our the consciousness, to raise the consciousness, raise the Kundalini awareness, in a way of helping others, of not, and that is very different from the activist who puts the hands in the mud, that we go in the mud and then we kind of get completely, like we drown in the mud, rather than maybe the alternative could be that you somehow raise your frequency, and you allow other people to see, like, hey, I can do this too. Or you can even, help people to come up from there by teaching and by conversations. But this importance of not losing your height, not losing your light, to kind of allow people to do their karma, to live their life, but navigate towards whatever their true self is and whatever their path is in their own timing. So
Yeah, no, I
there's
love that. That makes so much sense. And it's true. The energy is everything. And on the outside of things, people can, one thing that I've learned is that on the outside of things, people can still get great energy from you sometimes, even if you're not giving it to yourself, but then you'll run out of it and just stomp
yes.
into the ground eventually. And so then you don't live to fight another day. Then there's no more to be done because there's no energy left. But
Mm.
I think that's one of the things that I've learned in my time spent as a full-time sort of activist of various stripes is that there's this, I think in part in response to this machine that we're all sort of fighting against in many ways, like this capitalist, exponentially growing, just constantly expanding kind of very mechanistic, systematic, widespread machine that kind of controls everything, right? Um, is that like I think there's this idea, sometimes unspoken, and or maybe mostly unspoken in activist worlds, where there's this idea that we have to go hard and go fast because we have to counteract this hard and fast machine. There's no how else are we supposed to counteract it? We have to fight fire with fire. And ultimately, yes, we do need fire, but if we, if we don't ultimately uh, create more of a slow burn, then there's nothing left. So this
Yeah.
idea that I've seen so many activists, amazing activists, and I guess I have to count myself among them, just go so hard and so fast, and like these ingrained capitalist ideals of productivity within us, even as we're fighting the so-called good fight or fighting for
Yeah.
justice, advocating for ourselves and others. But it's a trap also because then it's an insidious one because it's just ultimately that is the frequency that we want to be remove ourselves from, not to replicate, right? And so
Yeah. Yeah.
in
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
environments like that too, it's surprising, it's quite shocking, but in environments where that's the energy and that's the frequency and that there's this constant frantic push, you also see power dynamics replicate themselves. Like you see misogyny replicate itself, you see racism replicate itself, even in a lot of these social justice environments. Um, just to give one example, I remember showing a film once at the Center for Gender Advocacy where we worked, which summed it up really beautifully. There were some climate justice activists there was a documentary about them somewhere in the Western US. And they were kind of locking themselves to giant trees to stop them from being chopped down. And I remember the leader of the group who was talking more to the media and getting more airtime and all of that was this white male guy who was basically just the face of the whole uh, campaign. And there were behind the scenes discussions among the activists where some of the women were expressing issues with the fact that he was the one speaking for all of them all the time, and that they wanted to have a different division of labor and this and that. And the response was basically like, well, that stuff, all that stuff is okay, well and good, but it's not as urgent as the climate. And so, the climate is the high up on the priority list, the top of the priority list, but anything with gender and all that, yeah, sure, it's important, but clearly it's not as urgent as the climate. But then as soon as we start to prioritize injustices like that, it's coming from a place of trying to meet capitalism where it's at, which is ultimately
Yeah.
misguided. And hopefully I'm making sense here. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. And what I've noticed is that the sense of empowerment comes from having the opportunity to adopt masculine behavior. And rather than, and that's, and it's just like kind of a mini white man doing the same things, operating in the same system, even if you are not, but also maybe that's not how you want to act. So like, how are the different forms of leadership, what are the different forms of changes? And when we talk about ahimsa, I think what ahimsa can teach us is this idea that the polarities that we create when we go fire to like fight fire with fire, it creates a lot of polarity. And it actually, I felt at one point that I'm feeding the opposite. Like as strong as I'm going, or the more strong I'm going, actually this is getting more and more kind of zest to be even more horrendous. And then sort of, okay, what happens if I stop this paradigm, this dichotomy between these two, and what is the option then? And then, yeah, what is the option? What is the other way of creating change? And it's amazing how within the activists, but even with the people you're trying to help, how unsatisfied they are when you bring up like discussions, um, doing stuff with your body, being family oriented, or even art. And I do absolutely think, I'm very convinced that the only alternative is by creating alternative culture. That the only thing, that it's not about being against something, but it is actually of creating something different, something new, with a completely different logic, systemic logic. And when we are so indoctrinated into this, and we are very good in West, and we are very happy to export this way of living to others, we just completely don't see how there are loads and loads of cultures who have this. All we need to do is to go to different cultures and respect and listen to what they are doing, and then we can actually learn. We could actually learn how to not oppress each other, how to not rip off the earth, how can we be successful and flourishing and abundant in different ways. But it just requires that, you could say, the yin way of the sea just carving the stone.
Mm.
It's a different way, but it definitely requires commitment and stamina.
Yeah,
And
definitely. Yeah. And also
yeah,
maybe requires this idea of ahimsa to be not only externalized but internalized. Like people who are committed to not doing themselves harm
yeah,
can are more equipped, let's say, to be the type of activists or advocates who are going to have that slow, sustainable fire going. They're going to be the kind of activists who don't only fight, but also celebrate when things work. When things work, take time to eat together. Take time to um, really like actually like the other human beings. Get to know the other human beings
yeah.
that you're working with.
Learn from
On
the righteousness and
exactly,
doing the right thing. Yeah, yeah,
exactly. Yeah.
yeah. Would you
So
like to do your meditation soon, or did you
sure.
have something to say still?
No, no, no. I think that's a good place. So I was thinking about leading us out of this conversation with a meditation, and to me, one of the natural places to go would be to focus on the heart space here and the transition moving from a sort of I, like a solo consciousness, to a we or a collective consciousness. But I thought that today I'd like to focus more on awareness because it's such a strong theme. So third eye is going to be the focus of this meditation. Our third eye point, which is between our eyebrows and slightly above, being the seat of our intuition and our clear perception. And essentially, this meditation is aimed at kind of helping us to strengthen our intuition, enhance our awareness, and it's ultimately awareness that will help us to um, be able to live non-violently, both towards ourselves and towards others. And so um, the best way to really feel what I'm talking about is to jump right in and try this meditation. So I'm going to invite everyone to bring your palms together in prayer pose. And the thumbs are out. You can see, oh, I'm not used to using my thumbs. So the thumbs
I'm
are
sure.
out, but the thumbs are pressed into the thumbs are pressed into the third eye point here.
Okay.
Is that visible? Yeah.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
there's a firm but gentle pressure on the third eye point here. And from here, I'm going to invite everyone to close your eyes. Actually, first make sure you're sitting comfortably and your spine is straight. You can sit on a chair, you can sit on the floor with a cushion to raise your hips up a little bit, whatever's comfortable for you. If you're sitting on a chair, plant your feet on the ground and make sure your spine is straight. And then tuck your chin slightly to lock your neck here a little, aligning your head with your spine. And I'll invite you now to close your eyes if they're not already closed, and roll your eyes up to focus on your third eye point here. So they're closed, but they're slightly rolled up. It can be a very subtle roll to focus on this point where you're pressing. And now from here, we will inhale and exhale long and deep. So in and out through the nose. We'll start to the count of 4. Let's try that. Inhale 1, 2, 3, 4 through the nose. And then exhale 1, 2, 3, hold. Now we're going to continue this inhale and exhale. If you can go deeper, say to 5 seconds or 7 seconds on each side, feel free to do so. And as you inhale and exhale, move the air through the third eye point. So you're inhaling and exhaling through your third eye point here, envisioning the air moving in and out through that point. This is the first part, and we'll begin now. We'll be here for about 3 minutes. This may become uncomfortable in the shoulders, but do your best. And if you absolutely need to rest the arms for a moment, just come back to it after. Now, as you're ready, continue the breath here. Continue to breathe through the third eye point, but bring your hands back to your lap. Continue the breath through this point. Continue to keep your eyes rolled up to focus on this point. And with every inhale, you'll mentally recite Sat. And with every exhale, you'll mentally recite Nam. Sat Nam, translated from the Gurmukhi to mean I am truth, or truth is my name. Let's continue. Take a deep inhale now through your nostrils and hold the breath in here. And as you're ready, exhale, allowing your breath to return to its natural state here, uncontrolled, taking a moment just to observe. And as you're ready, fluttering your eyes open again.
Thank you. Thank you so much for today. Looking very much for our next session in 2 weeks.
Same, yes, yes. I can't be here next week, but our teacher Selima will be here with lots of great wisdom to spout. I know. So
Yeah. So I'm going to be talking with Salima from Yoga Vision Online, and yeah, stay tuned.
thanks so much, Rika.
Bye. Bye. Bye.